energetic. I don't know why that's happening. Okay. Also, I wrote this out because I have a tendency to ramble, so forgive the academic conference format for this. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Humanities Center and Walter Edwards for curating this project and for securing funds for all of our projects. In my case, the funds have helped to jumpstart a project I've hoped to begin for a decade but lacked the funds to do it. It's sad to me that the pandemic brought this to fruition, but I'm grateful nonetheless. My project is creating a short buto work to be performed and filmed outside when it's warm. It is in witness to the COVID-19 pandemic, now a complete year of immersed 24-hour daily focus on disease and death, allied in a global audience experiencing fear, terror, and eventually sometimes numb fatigue. It is a tribute to the frontline and delivery workers who found themselves sacrificing their health and lives to keep the world alive, with, as I predicted, no real compensation for their trials, nor yet access to the life-saving vaccine. I'm creating all aspects and components of this work, which includes a musical score, choreography, costume, and the filming process. And this is drawn from nearly 10 years of research on Japanese Buto and its founder, Hijikata Tatsumi. So I don't know if this is working, I'm assuming that it is. This is Hijikata in his hometown of northern Japan, far away from the center of Tokyo, and this is him visiting his hometown after he moved to Tokyo after the war ended. So just to preface, probably this is obvious, but Tokyo was completely decimated after the war. So the sensibility of rebuilding Japan happened in this context of complete desolation. But Hijikata's hometown was even in worse situation than that because of the inherent poverty of this northern community. So this is him going back to learn, how can I say this, to go back and learn this stooped gesture of the body that plants rice, that sits in this stooped gesture. He's trying to sort of go back and figure out if he can mine his experience for movement that actually means something to him personally. Buto was born in Japan as Ankoku Buto, or Dance of Darkness. Hijikata... I'm sorry, is everything okay? Okay, sorry. Hijikata created Buto in the desolation of post-war 1950s Japan, rejecting both traditional Japanese and Western modern dance. Calling it, quote, a corpse walking upright, unquote. His performances reference the poverty of northern Japan, as I'm trying to show here, his home, and the shambles in which Tokyo found itself after the war ended. In addition to the loss of Japanese embodied life via westernization and the modernization process. Buto, I've been researching Buto for at least 10 years with a focus on Hijikata and his creative process, and this grant gave me the opportunity to bring this to research. Let's put this down here. Excuse me. Hijikata's works focused on the diseased, dying, decaying, and the aging body. His first work was in 1959, and it included the sacrifice of a chicken done in a manner that was highly controversial, and it earned him the complete shunning of his work from the modern dance community in Tokyo. But this didn't dissuade him from creating work that continued to serve what he thought needed to be done. So in 1972, he created a multi-movement piece called Hosotan, which means, it translates as smallpox. And it's a really old term for this. There are more modern terms, so the fact that he chose this is also kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, Hijikata witnessed the ravages of the disease firsthand in rural Japan because his community lost many to smallpox before the vaccine was widely available. So there are huge parallels. I've been studying Hijikata's work intensely for quite a long time, but I never ever thought that I would have the experience of understanding what it's like to live in a terrifying moment of, and we didn't have war on top of this, so it's kind of, it was a really kind of poignant moment for me to be part of this whole thing during this time period. I'm drawing on Hosotan both for its themes, but also the process by which Hijikata created his musical score. This is a final excerpt from the final scene of 9. And this is the scene. I'm going to show you a little bit of this work. They're very difficult to find because the only place you can see this stuff, there's a little clips on YouTube, which is what I'm using, but all of Hijikata's works are available in a single place, which is Keio University in Tokyo. So you have to go physically to that place, which is open 3 days a week for 5 hours a day. So it's kind of this almost like a mythical status that Hijikata now has. I'm not sure why that's the case, but anyway, let me show you what this looks like. So this is Hosotan, beginning with a section from Hijikata. So this is Hijikata himself. This is the penultimate scene where you can see him performing himself, and then the last scene with his company of dancers. I should stop this and just give a trigger warning because the next scene is pretty graphic and it doesn't include violence, but it does very much depict a dying smallpox patient. And if this is something that you've experienced, you may not want to be watching. Okay. So it's a pretty powerful work. The entire work is really, really, really powerful. And the music that Hijikata chose to accompany this varies from what you just heard, which was an excerpt of Bailaro, which is composed by a French composer named Joseph Canteloube. And the song depicts the provincial French countryside, and it's actually a really kind of nice, the lyrics are very nice and pleasant. So it's kind of interesting choice for that last scene, and it's actually used twice in 2 other scenes in that piece as well. So this is part of what I was trying to understand when I was in Japan in 2019, was to why would you score this and alongside traditional Japanese music. In some cases, many cases, he chose things like German craft, like German early electro and elevator music as well, Percy Faith. So it's been perplexing, but I think I finally understand it, and I'm working on a book at the moment. And in this project, I'm attempting to do what I think is close to his compositional method. So Hijikata had very little money, and what he had, he paid his dancers. He created the majority of his musical scores, collaging excerpts from pieces from LP albums, recording and combining them on a reel-to-reel. These recordings are held at Keio University in Tokyo, the single place besides short excerpts where one can access the Hijikata's works, like I mentioned. I was invited to Kyoto. I mentioned this before. Okay, so the sound score is complete. My sound score is complete. And it is a collage of layered sound sources and musical aesthetics. In the process, I feel closest to Hijikata's methods. The final musical score is roughly 5 minutes at the moment, still kind of editing some things at this point, but it includes interviews of Amazon workers and also a clip from a piece called Time Wind that Hijikata used in many, many different pieces. So I'm just going to excerpt the the score. Sorry, hold on.
To work kind of scares me because we have a silent killer, inside of our job. And Amazon is not taking the proper precautions to slow the spread or even stop the spread.
I have to do this. I can't not pay my bills and live my life.
Morning to work kind of scares me. Morning to work kind of scares me.
Okay, I'll end it there. Let's see. So the dancer for this piece, the choreography is complete. The costume is still working on it very slowly. Excuse me. We'll be filming, as I mentioned, outside via drone and 2 other still cameras. The dancer is a former student from the music department, Laura, and she is someone who's just fantastic for this project in the sense that she's well acquainted with the themes of Butoh and she's a completely fearless performer. So I was fortunate to know someone who could do this. It's rare to find someone willing to take the risks with something as kind of grotesque looking as Butoh often is, particularly in a project like this. So she will be wearing a costume, a sheath sort of body suit with Amazon panels, Amazon deconstructed boxes, which I'm going through the process of attaching to the sheath. So the sheath has to move with her and it has to be flexible, but I kind of want her to look like a bug, actually. And this is for various reasons connected to Hijikata's philosophy. So this is kind of an experiment. I don't know if I would have done it had I not had the funding, because it's been a lot of work, but I was able to pay Laura significantly for this, which was really a nice thing. So, okay, that's what I have. I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna stop.
Thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully my volume's a little bit better. Yes? Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions, please remember to type them in the chat box so we can go back to them during the Q&A. So our next presenter is Leith Campbell, and the title is Fanfare and Procession, subtitle, and a tonal electronic symphony exploring the notion of personal and community spaces in an age of social distancing. Leith Campbell is a multidisciplinary artist currently interested in forming an architectural conception of sound. Currently a faculty member at Wayne State in the Music Technology program and a staff member at the College for Creative Studies, where they teach and aid both faculty and students in metal fabrication and sculptural technique. Leith has performed solo and in collaboration at the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, the Power Center in Ann Arbor, Orchestra Hall, Red Bull Arts Detroit, Public Pool Gallery, and Every D'Electricity Festival. In addition to the creation of works, Leith is active in the avant-garde music community as a sound and recording engineer, technical director, and performer.
Good afternoon. Everybody hear me okay? Coming in?
Yes.
I apologize for the loud environment. It's the most solo room I could find right now. So, hello, 10 minutes is hard for me. Sometimes I have trouble saying hello in under 10 minutes, but let me set a timer here for myself right now, because I'll just carry on, I promise. So the basic, I'll start with the basic presentation of the piece. It's sort of a musical piece, sort of a performance piece that takes place outdoors. It could take place inside as well, but it's conceived of outdoors, using the resonant spaces in a particular piece of architecture. One that comes to mind are like the arches on the David Adamani undergraduate, or the arches on the student hall, the student center. Any place outside like that has hard walls and and columns and whatnot that create resonances, which the importance of which I'll get to later. And it the artifact of performance itself is just a small box that actually, a small box that makes a certain amount of tone at a certain volume and has an adjustable frequency on it. And using an aleatoric process, I hand out the number of steps that each person is going to take on a particular round. And so the way it would start is you get your first number, you pick up a box, you carry the prerequisite amount of steps, and then you set a new frequency on it, which you think sounds good with the piece, until all of these boxes are off from their starting place. And then everybody starts to loop through this architectural space, progressing these boxes along in a pathway and changing the frequencies the entire time. Always sort of randomized, but randomized within a constrained set of rules and always headed in the same direction through a resonant space. So that's the basic rules. Why would I do such a crazy thing? So we'll do historical antecedents. Like I said before, I'm very fascinated with the notion of architecture and music and architecture and sound. I find them to be sister disciplines that inform each other on a regular basis and work together. One of the first ones, I mean, there's many in history, but one of the main ones you can think about is the cathedral choirs or organs inside of a cathedral, where the building and the music are designed both for each other, so that they mix and they create a certain aesthetic feeling that is incapable of being captured without the two of them working together. A little bit more recently, a big influence of mine is the composer Alvin Lucier, who you may know for his most famous piece, which is called "I Am Sitting in a Room," where he recorded himself speaking a paragraph, and then he played the recording back into the room while recording that again, so that through the repetitions, his speech was smoothed over, and it was just the resonant frequencies of the room that were happening. And it's a study of the signature, the hidden signature of the audio of a room, just by using repetitive recording. And I find the aesthetics of this just to be very, very fascinating. Sometimes Lucier, it's hard to make a distinction between a science experiment and an artistic piece. And I think that's part of the fun, is this flipping back and forth in between the aesthetic and the rational world, and trying to decide exactly where it's landing, because inevitably this piece ends up becoming beautiful, but when you're actually breaking it down in your head, it seems just very, almost like a science experiment. He had another piece that we performed at Wayne State at the Electronic Music Ensemble that also kind of shines light on my project that's called Still Moving Lines of Silence in Families of Hyperbolas. And that involved multiple speakers and with sound waves very close to each other. And if any of you ever played with sound or even listened to somebody tune an instrument, there's a certain amount of beating that happens. It's an audible beating is what we call it, or a pulsation, when two instruments are very closely tuned but not quite in tune. And what we would do is set these frequencies and then carry snare drums around and try and find different parts of the room where this beating would take place, showing that sound is not just a phenomenon that you sit in a chair and just kind of blows by you, and then the concert's over and you clap and go have wine and cheese, but instead is a place, a three-dimensional place that exists, and that you can inhabit it in many ways other than sitting in a concert chair. The performance itself, mostly it follows from the idea of the Fluxus happenings and their event scores. And Fluxus was a 60s group who it was a real combination, especially kind of for the first time in history, where musicians and artists and writers and theater and dance and all of that all happened at once and got together and made these happenings, these unannounced public events that would take place on a city street. They had another idea that was called the event score, where they would write up a short list of rules like I just talked about, and would generally and then would go execute it either in a concert hall or in a public place. And finally, my biggest influence here is, and ties in with what we're going through right now, is the notion of public sound. All through our history, we have public sound. So church bells, or elk horn, or the African singing drums for communication, the dungchen of the Tibetan monks, all of these instruments that make big sounds over long, long geographic distances. And what this sound would do, I mean, it would be, or the call to prayer, for example, it would be a call, it would be a communication system, it would be a service is beginning, or some emergency is happening in the community. But if you're in the border of the sound, you're within the border of the community, you're within the border of that communication. And as I walk through the streets, and it's just empty of the sounds that I just thrill to. I live in this world of observed sound. I wanted to bring some of that community sound back in to reignite these spaces, at least a little bit. The aesthetic effect is mostly has to do with the interference of waves as they bounce off of the hard surfaces of the buildings, and how they interfere with each other. And also, every building has an audio signature called its resonant frequency, and that has to do with the sound waves that fit in between two flat spaces. There is an exact sound wave that does a full cycle in between two walls, and when you find that frequency, it actually becomes perceptibly louder as the building joins into the resonation of the sound. And so that's why I'm allowing for a lot of frequency variation, so that we can stumble across those sounds. And I believe people will hear it and then tune into the frequency of the building and kind of jam the building, so to speak. Moving on quickly. The way it will work in social distancing times is everybody stays always 6 feet apart, and we're outside. There's no contact. The only contact is touching the boxes and using gloves. So, and then finally, I was going to talk a little bit about my design build process. So first it was conception, of course, and then I had to do prototyping on a thing called a breadboard, which is a circuit prototyping piece of equipment. Once I had that circuit up and running, then I could put it into a program, and then have have my circuit boards printed up and sent to me, which makes the entire design build process go so much faster, because now the electrics are not linear. I can just slap them all into the board, solder them up, and go like heck. And so here's a board once it's been populated. Also, I add a speaker and an amplifier, and then I'm enclosing all of them in a reclaimed cardboard that I found that was in really good shape, and I laser cut out a form, and then I can just fold it into my boxes. And install the circuitry in the box. This makes this very agile, makes it happen very fast. I'm going for 36 total instruments. I'm actually going for 40 because I'm expecting some to break down. But makes the production process fast, even though I'm really the only person doing it. And it makes, right now I'm just about done. So I brought a few of them.
Did he freeze?
I was hoping that Leith would pop back on here. We'll just give it a second. We do have a few minutes just in case, so we'll see if Leith pops back on. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be back, but we can move on to Caitlin Lynch and AJ White. The title of their project was Captured in Song. Caitlin Lynch is a professional opera singer, voice teacher, and producer. AJ White is a fourth-year music business major and business administration minor at Wayne State. He has been assisting with song portraits and is one of our featured performers.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll get us started with a little bit of an intro. I wrote something down just for the sake of time as well. And then I'll turn it over to Professor Lynch. So Captured in Song was born out of the need to be heard. This is a time at which people need to be heard for their human experiences, right? And who better to capture than students right now, specifically college-age students who are going through so many transitions, let alone a global pandemic. So we gathered 7 student singers and we asked 6 poets to capture their experiences through text, which would then be set to music by 4 composers and performed by the 7 original vocalists. This process created 7 distinct musical selections, which oddly enough had several themes connecting them to each other. And we gathered as diverse a collection of artists as we could. I myself crossed a number of intersections between being Black in America right now, a trans masculine person, and a student. And we want to cover as many stories as we possibly can and hope to do more. The poem and song that we chose today is called On Stillness and Song, written by Nadine Marshall, set to music by Dr. Brandon Waddles, and it's about the life of vocal performance major Ashley Baylor. Professor Lynch, if you want to say a couple words.
Thanks so much, AJ. I'm going to share my screen and start our presentation of the actual project. Hopefully you can all see this. This production was a collaborative effort between Detroit Song Collective and Wayne State. And like AJ said, we were eager to capture or zoom in on the singers, the students right now. And we did so in poetry, in photography, and in song. So you'll see photographs that we have just throughout this mini presentation, which is just like a sampling of what will be our final product. And all of the photography was either taken or edited by our 2 photographers that we had on the project, aside from 1 or 2 headshots. So I just want you to keep in mind too that many of the images are also brand new. AJ is one of my voice students at Wayne State. And this project came out of a conversation that he and I had towards the beginning of 2 semesters ago. In the midst of this pandemic, I encouraged all of my students to pick out their own repertoire. That felt important to me now, especially because I wanted them to really connect to the poetry. That's a big piece of what we do in our voice lessons, is we talk about the poems and communication of text. And AJ had a hard time connecting with a lot of the traditional art song repertoire as far as the poetry and the music. And so we were inspired to create something new altogether. out of such a dark and confusing time for so many people. And so the students we chose to capture, you see here, these are our 7 students, and they have really beautiful, vulnerable, and powerful stories to tell from their lives, and especially from this past year of the pandemic. And they have really incredible, authentic voices to match. They've given me such hope and inspiration, especially this past year. And they range in age from 18 to 24. AJ and Jenna Dell are both music business majors. Angelina and Ben are music education majors. Chris is music technology, and Ashley and Stephen are vocal performance majors. I met with each student and their poetic collaborator over Zoom in December, and it was through those Zoom meetings that the poets drew inspiration from each individual singer and then were inspired to create poetry. The collaborations were super powerful, and the poetry and friendships that resulted are proof of how important those meetings felt, especially when we were all so eager to connect and create. So one student actually described this whole experience as therapeutic, which I thought was really beautiful and felt important to me. Our 6 incredible poets are all Wayne State University affiliated. Carolyn Mon is the English department chair, and she said yes to this project right away when I reached out to her, which meant a lot to me. Because we just, AJ and I didn't know, sort of how it would be received. It felt like a lot of layers. And Carolyn helped me get in touch with some other poets that ended up on the project, which include Melinda Baker and Alexandra. They are both creative writing. I'm going to move back a little bit. They're both creative writing grad students right now at Wayne State University. M.L. Liebler is a creative writing professor right now, and Robert is an alum, and so is Nadine. They're both Wayne State alums. Robert is currently pursuing a PhD in creative writing at University of Michigan. And Nadine Marshall has been an important part of Detroit Song Collective over the past few years, and you'll hear their poetry soon. Our composers are all Wayne State affiliated as well. Dr. Nora Duncan is the music department chair, and Dr. Brandon Waddles is a newly appointed professor of music education and choral studies at Wayne State, and we're super excited to have him on our team. You'll hear his composition soon. Dr. Anderson is music theory and composition professor, and Logan Hahn is a composition and theory graduate student. Logan, Dr. Waddles, and Dr. Anderson each composed 2 songs, and Dr. Duncan composed 1 song to make up our 7. Our poets and singers were captured in photographs by Rachel Cullen, who is a Wayne State alum, and Ian Maisie, who is a current voice performance graduate student at Wayne State in the music department. The pianist who rehearsed and coached and performed all 7 songs is Dr. Stephen McGee, who is our incredible collaborative pianist at Wayne State. We received grants from poets and writers from the Michigan Humanities, and of course this grant from the Humanities Center from Wayne State, which really gave us the courage to go forward and get more funding and to just sort of have a stamp of approval on our project. It meant a lot. So we're super grateful. Gretchen Davidson, the Roberts Hafner family, and Lynch and Sons Fund for the Arts were also contributors and donors to our project. The first poem you will hear is on Stillness and Song. This is a sampling of one of the 7. You'll see Nadine read their poem, and then Ashley and Dr. McGee will perform the song setting that Dr. Waddles composed.
I don't think we can hear it.
Okay. I wonder if this will work.
Caitlin, we cannot hear.
Okay, let's see
Yes.
how I can make it heard.
Some of us can hear it. I can hear it, but apparently it's selective.
Selective hearing. So some of you can, but some of you can't. I'm not sure if there's a way I can figure out. Maybe if I stop the share and start it again. It says share sound. I'm just going to click that again.
Yeah.
Melinda can hear it fine.
Thanks, Melinda.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try again.
And Cheryl said, when you click the little box on the bottom to optimize for the video clip. I don't know what that means, but.
Okay. Thank you. I've got it. I didn't click that box. Now it's clicked. Let's see if this works. Hold on. Can you hear? No.
Yeah, some can't hear still.
I can hear.
Before we move on to the song itself, I just want to get a sense of who can hear me and who can't.
If you can hear, will you raise your hand, have a reaction?
So some can and some can't. That's very strange to me. I wonder if I could send like a link or something to the poetry and song for it feels super important for me to share this piece of our project. It's like the fruition of all of it. So enough of you are hearing it that I think I'll just continue with the song. And then for those of you who aren't able to hear it for whatever technical reason, I'll send a link somehow. And just for all of our participants or whoever is interested can reach out to me and I'll make sure that you have this poem and song.
Yes, and Caitlin, we are recording. So since Walter and I believe Tiffin can also hear it, hopefully it's being recorded. So then when we share the recording, it will. But yes, please continue.
Perfect. That's great.
If not, we'll get the link from you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can't hear. Can't hear. No.
So this was made possible by Steve Wogeman and the Chamber Music Society of Detroit. He helped us with the video, the audio, and the editing. And for all of our graphics, we had Angela Ficorelli and Jossa Washington, who helped us design some of our slides. Everything was recorded. All of the poetry and songs were recorded in Wayne State's recital hall, the Chamber Music Recital Hall. And our entire program of all of the poems and songs will be live streamed and shared that way on Thursday, March 11th. So look out for some information on that full performance of our project. Thank you. AJ, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I think you covered it all. Just thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for believing in our project and giving us the go ahead. It really has, like I've said to AJ a couple of times, that the process has felt as important, if not more so, than what may be the product, which not all of you got to even experience. But our singers are so incredible, our students are so incredible, and the collaboration with the poets and then the composers, and to find a way to safely be in the recital hall space again, making live music together, having conversations about tempi and phrasing and things musical. We've been so starved for that kind of collaboration and connection, and so we've just been so excited and felt really honored to have the time and space and energy and support to do something creative and musical and poetic out of this time. So I'm super grateful to the students and the composers and the poets and our amazing collaborative pianist and all of the people who helped. So thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who couldn't hear, we will get you the link or get you the recording so you will be able to enjoy. We're going to try to circle back. Leith, did you have something you wanted to add? Did you want to finish your presentation?
No, not the first time I've broken Zoom trying to do audio stuff, so it's pretty common occurrence to me. I'm used to it. Thank you for asking, though.
Okay. All right. So we are going to move on to Joseph Matter. The title of the project is How to Move. And Joseph Matter is a junior BFA dance major with a co-major in university honors. His response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been to create as much as possible, showing that art and movement are important to humanity now more than ever. Joseph?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much, Heather, for that introduction. Also, an enormous thank you to Dr. Edwards, Tiffin, and the entire advisory board of the Humanities Center for making this possible. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All right, let me know if any problems come up with viewing this. So my project is titled How to Move. As Heather said, my name is Joseph Matar. I also go by Joey. Essentially, How to Move is an introspective performance and philosophy research project. It was an enormous collaboration through so many amazing people in the dance department at Wayne State, as well as local Detroit artists. And I would be remiss if I just didn't thank each and every one of these people so wholeheartedly. One of the most amazing parts of having the funding for this project was to be able to compensate local artists for their work in a way that was meaningful to them. So Brody Glaza, who composed the project, we worked very intently together in order to create a musical score that we felt both of us felt really encompassed what it meant to think about the self. Also thinking about Taylor Kraft and Kayla Gonzalez, my videographers, Megan O'Brien, a lighting designer who you will see created some just phenomenal works in Old Main, our studio theater. Also Evelyn Gaines, a research collaborator, and I had three faculty mentors that helped with this project, Jessica and Allison, who really helped facilitate a creative response between me and my peers, and really had us really deep dive about what it is that we were creating, as well as Dr. Biba Bell, who helped really just spark this initial research in a lot of ways through her choreography class and offering a lot of mentorship along the way. So this is sort of an updated abstract of the piece. I really think that research into the self offers modalities in which we can relate to each other. So we need to really understand who we are before we can understand who other people are. This really moves us through, allows us to figure out how we want to move through the world, what ethical theories, moral reasonings propel us into relating to those around us. So to dive a little bit more about the process, how we got to our final screen dance performance. A lot of modalities of research were used, starting off with my research team, Taylor and Evelyn. We got on Zoom a lot. We had a lot of discussions, a lot of intimate discussions about ethical theories and relating to each other in really intimate ways, which was beautiful and brought us both together, all three of us. Also, a lot of the research was solo, such as a 12-hour lecture series called Moral Decision Making. That was from Clancy Martin from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Also, How Can I Help by Ram Dass. Just really diving into a lot of philosophers' thinkings, both in the past and modern. So going along with that process, I did try to incorporate live streams to sort of give the general public sort of a window into what it means to create work during a pandemic, what it means to be a dancer during a pandemic. So these live streams were a way to sort of open up that creative window. Dr. Biba Bell, one of my faculty mentors, talked a lot about last semester. She brought up this idea of performance with a capital P versus performance with a lowercase p, what that means, and sort of how we can go about making work that is seen by people versus making work that's polished and finished and ready to be presented. So sort of these live streams were a way of me to be utilizing performance with a lowercase p, just opening this window into my creative process, which was very improvisational and very candid, versus performance with that capital P, which is what I'll share with you guys in just a moment. So moving on into the fact that this project is very much ongoing research. It began last semester, as I said, with Dr. Biba Bell, through my first screen dance in the process, which was titled Reflections. A lot of this was the self-evaluating, the looking internally about who I am, and then How to Move, which is the next iteration, focused more on critical thinking and relating to others. Again, this project will continue to evolve. I'm hoping to fold more people into the process in a performance aspect as that becomes safe to do and as that becomes an opportunity for us at the college. And also a live iteration of How to Move will be performed at Wayne State's first live theater and dance performance since the pandemic began, and that'll be in April, which we are just so excited for, and we are dreaming about it every single night. So again, that's How to Move. I'm not going to share the video just because I don't have the best Wi-Fi and I don't want it to skip or lag for anybody, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm actually just going to drop a link for you guys in the chat. So feel free to click the link, take a moment to watch this screen dance video. Again, it'll be converted into a live performance in April, and then I can just bring everybody back in about 4.5 minutes to close it out.
Thank you, Joey. We'll watch it and then we'll be back.
People was there when say not sure if this was
Hopefully that video is wrapping up for most of you guys. Just a reminder, the theater and dance at Wayne will be having a performance with a live version of that as well. Feel free to check them out on social media or the website to learn more. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Joey. Okay, so our last presenter for the first portion of the conference is going to be Elise Martin. The title of her project is Fragile Forms of Comfort. Elise Martin is a visual artist working primarily in the areas of sculpture, fiber arts, and painting. She received her BFA from the College of Creative Studies in 2012 and is currently pursuing her MFA from Wayne State University with a focus in fibers. Her studio practice is complemented by her work in art education and community arts programming.
Hi. Hello,
Hey.
everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this opportunity to share this work with you all. Opportunities to share visual artwork have been really rare this past year. So I am going to share my screen if I have permission. Yeah. Heather, if you could give me permission to share.
Tiffin?
Yes, I made her co-host.
Okay.
Cool. Here we go. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So can everybody see that? My little presentation here? Cool. Okay. So yeah, as Heather mentioned, I'm an MFA candidate in the fibers department. But that said, I tend to work in a lot of different materials and processes within my work. And as a maker of art objects, I've become really invested in the autonomy of the things I'm creating and in the power of objects in general to influence human behavior. So what I usually do in my work is I try to create these, yes.
Elise, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but I hear someone moving in the background. I'm not sure who that is. I'm going to make sure everybody's microphones are off.
Okay. Yeah. Is that better? Is that, or are people still hearing noises?
No,
I don't
it's
hear
not.
anything.
I don't think it's you. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank
Okay.
you, appreciate it. So what I typically try to do with my work is I try to create these art objects that sort of tiptoe the line between passive object and active participant, and by inviting engagement and encouraging interaction with the work. But with the onset of the pandemic, in-person gallery shows have been really rare this past year, and I haven't been able to create the types of work that I typically create. So with that in mind, I kind of decided for myself that if I couldn't create an experience for others in the gallery, that I would try and create an experience for myself working in the studio, and kind of use that to replicate the types of behavior I was seeing in the world, and hopefully that experience would then be evidenced in the objects themselves. So one thing that really caught my attention, particularly like in the onset of the pandemic, was just how people were coping with being denied access to their comfortable routines. And I began thinking a lot about how access to certain objects can really play into our sense of comfort or contribute to our sense of unease. And I was interested in exploring this more in my work, and it became very obvious that certain people were more equipped to deal with this and to adapt than others. So to begin to unpack all of this, I went into the ceramic studio and I started sculpting these ceramic comfort objects. And if you've ever worked in ceramics, you'll know that there's quite a process to getting these objects to their finished form. So, I'm hand sculpting these objects, and then there's an initial firing, a bisque firing, and then they get underglazed with color, and then there's another firing, and then they get a final top coat of glaze, and then they're fired for a third time, just to get to the final form. And I'm going through this whole process with these objects, and then I'm just sort of breaking them. And the idea being that I, go through this whole process of crafting a very rigid sense of comfort for myself, and then breaking it rather haphazardly in an instant, and then going through the process of mending them into these newly fortified forms. So this is the first object that I underwent this mending process with. So this was a ceramic blueberry pie that I made, and then it's been broken, and I went through that whole process I just outlined and broke it, and then it's been mended back together using a lot of different textile mending and garment mending practices. And in the world of fibers, there's a lot of processes, and there's a history of artful mending that I can pull from. And that was something that was really important to me with these pieces. I didn't want to just assemble the objects back together using some sort of adhesive and try to camouflage the breaks. I really wanted to introduce new materials that maybe aren't typically associated with ceramic, and create new forms that were more flexible and dynamic, and most of all more interesting. So this is the next object that I worked on. So this was like a ceramic succulent flower box, and then I've gone through and mended it using mostly crochet and knit techniques. So with this piece, I started to really break beyond that original form of the object, and crochet was really great for that. Crochet lends itself really well to creating these sort of organic feeling forms, and I was trying to break out beyond the original structure of the object. And then this is a ceramic sweater that I mended using different basketry and netting techniques. And this was a replica of my partner's favorite comfy sweater. So that was another sort of like parameter I set for myself with this body of work. I really wanted to use objects that were personal to me and that I get a sense of comfort from. But my hope was that they'd be universal enough that others would, recognize them as objects of comfort as well. And then this was the next one I did. This was the toughest one for me to actually break and go through this process with. First of all, because he was just so stinking cute, I didn't want to break him at first. And then when I did finally work up the courage to break him, even after the 8-foot drop onto a concrete floor, all that broke on this guy was his little legs. But this sculpture then got mended using knit wire and wire staples. So this is kind of a play on a traditional ceramic mending practice of mending things with wire staples. But for this piece, I also did a lot of research into teddy bear mending and like teddy bear restoration. So there's a little nod to that as well. I learned that when you're restoring old teddy bears, a lot of that value is really sentimental value. So if they remove any material in the teddy bear mending process, like if they have to replace a patch of fur or something, they'll reincorporate that stuff or that material back into the bear as stuffing. So really kind of keeping the integrity of the original bear intact. And I just thought that was so sweet. So you can see here in his little leg, within the wire mesh, I've incorporated all those little bits of ceramic that were too small to be mended back into the overall form. And then this was the last piece that I worked on. So this was a ceramic pillow that I used a lot of different, or a few different woodworking and kind of furniture restoration techniques on. So I just took remnants of wood from our wood shop here at home and created this glue up, kind of mimicking the quilted pattern that I was referencing in the ceramic pillow. And then the wood has been attached to the pillow using these corner protectors that you would use to kind of like reinforce the corners of a, maybe an antique trunk or like an end table, these little black brass fixtures here. Yeah, and this is going to be the last object that I work on in this series. I had a few other mending ideas that I didn't get to realize within this body of work, but in a way, I think it's kind of fitting that I wrap this body up now. It's almost a year after COVID hit the US, and I think we're all sort of adapting now into new routines and really figuring out what comfort will look like for us going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes that we can have a Q&A session. If you want to, you can put a question into the chat, or you can take yourself off mute. Be patient. You know how it's kind of awkward when multiple people are taking themselves off mute. So yeah, does anyone have any questions for any of the makers and artists? Cheryl?
Hey. Hi, this is for a lot of you who are beginning to work with processes that are new to you because of the pandemic. So I'm most familiar with Joey. And so I was thinking like, oh, you know, the idea of videoing dance might be new, but I was also thinking about Butoh, and I've actually seen a fair amount of Butoh, but how does having to do it outside change your process of approaching the work? So this is sort of for everybody. I'm really interested in that.
Okay, I'm back in.
Do any of our artists have a response to that?
I could jump in about that briefly. I mean, I definitely know, I mean, Cheryl, you said it very well, like we had not really been utilizing videography as a modality of transporting dance to an audience as often before the pandemic hit. I feel like since we've gone into lockdown, I've made like so many like videographed dance performances. And, you know, at the beginning, actually, it was really hard because I felt like there was this huge aspect of live performance that was getting taken away. I felt like there was a very intimate connection between performer and audience member that was missing, and it made me not want to be creating unless I could find that. As we got into the fall semester, I really had to overcome that. And I think, you know, being actually in class with Biba and just forcing ourselves to choreograph. Me and my peers were in a choreography 3 class. And so just being forced to choreograph and create more and more really broke down that barrier of nervousness and scared feelings and allowed it to blossom into something that was different, but still engaging.
I see Jorgelina has up her hand. She needs to unmute.
You need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, thanks to all the presenters. This is a wonderful program. I am just trying to put together some thoughts about a talk that I am giving next Wednesday for the Humanities Center about the world we are living in. And you have provided me so much inspiration from different aspects with the body language, with the voice. Unfortunately, I was not able to hear the poem. And the last piece regarding objects and the mending and this adaptive process that all of us, we are going through during the pandemic. I was thinking to start my presentation with the notion of time and space. And when I was watching you dancing, trying to measure the space, to appropriate of the space, and all the multiple meanings that the relation between the body and the very naked scenography, except the table, with some pieces on the table that I would be interested in knowing more. I saw some notes about how to move. And so, well, hopefully we are going to get together again on Wednesday, but I celebrate this part that I was able to watch very much. I think is wonderful.
Thank you so much. Any comments back to that? Or any other questions?
There is something that Parvina put on chat, which is might be a question.
Yeah, hello. No, it's just a comment. As I was listening to the conversation that videography and dance, just a minor note that, I have younger sons who are in college, and this group, all over the US, the high school students are organizing dance competition, like in a virtual mode. So they are young students making videos and performances. So that's like one thing I just wanted to share, that the pandemic has kind of modified, right? How the people are still striving and looking for ways to accommodate, to bring on that creativity and art through dance.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my chat keeps going away, so I apologize. I'm trying to navigate that as I'm trying to see who's raising their hand or anything. I don't see, at least on my end, any other hands raised. So we have about 7 more. Oh, sorry, I was especially excited. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just a comment. So
Okay.
you
Cheryl said, I was especially excited to see how the videography amplified Joey's work, as well as opposed to creating another veil. Sorry for the echo. I'm not sure what's happening. If anybody needs to take a break before 1:30, because that's when the second portion is going to start, please do so now, just to make sure you're ready for that.
Heather, I think Sylvia had her hand up. I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you, Tiffin. I did. I was curious about and my that was already briefly mentioned, but I had a question for Joey, because I thought your set was so beautiful, and I really liked the lamp and the different notes and books that were on it, but it happened very fast. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that. What the meaning is, how you created that. I would be curious if you would like to share that. Thank you.
Definitely, I can briefly jump in there. It was such a treat to be back in the Maggie Alicey Studio Theater in general, because we hadn't been in there for about a year. And so I was trying to decide how was the space going to really connect with my work, rather than just being a space in which my work lived. So that is why I decided to bring in that table. The table almost acted. Sorry, can you guys still hear me? Okay, cool. The table for me acted as a way of almost all of the research and all of the thoughts and collaborative ideas that we had been experimenting were sort of contained in that table. And then the space almost acted as this void of life and as timeline and relating to others. And it sort of just acted as like, yes, all of this is research, all of this is thought-provoking, but then how can we apply it to the real world? The lamp illuminating that as sort of its own space, and then the lighting design by Megan O'Brien really bringing together the architecture of the curtains to the floor to the body in this organic shape in a rigid structure. Hopefully that offers some insight into that. Yeah, the notes and things were just mostly like research, note-taking about my process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Does anybody have any other questions for any of the other artists? Just scrolling through to see if there's any hands raised. Okay, well then we have about 4 minutes and then we're going to start the second portion of the conference, and Nicole is going to be taking over for moderating. Like I said before, if you need a break, you could take it. If not, we're still going to be here. So if you think of a question in the next 4 minutes, I'll gather everyone together to ask it.
Why don't we give all the presenters a big hand of thanks for presenting and for negotiating all the technical difficulties, and the moderator for moderating with aplomb, even though there were all these challenges. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. It just shows that our resilience, even in the pandemic, that if you want to achieve something, we press on and we get it done. So thank you. Yes. Somebody has raised a hand.
Oh, I was clapping. That was my reaction of clapping.
Okay. All right.
Well, I have another comment. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I feel that this is extremely rich, all the presentations with different aspects of a new reality that we have been gone through, and we are not out yet with the pandemic. So one of the things among so many is this idea of fragile forms of comfort, because really all of us, we have been taken away of our different comfort zones. And when you, Elise, put the ad, a haircut, well, we really experience in our hair and the variations and the different colors, how have been our body has been affected in a connection with our mind, because the hair is an important part of the human body and the way you look. So this out of our comfort zone, and we have to readapt with unknown resources, because I have been reading Philip Ross for another seminar when the polio came to New York, and when I was in Argentina, there was polio too. But I don't remember that was really so important in our lives. But this has touched all over the world, of course, with differences according to social class and race, unfortunately, or confirming the disparity. So I think to see this put visually, with the body, with the objects, with the music, and I am eager to read the poetry, is an incredible event that has given me a lot of joy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I agree. Yes, it was so nice to see everybody's work and how we're all interpret everything. So
yeah,
great.
You agree about the hair too, no?
Right.
Okay.
All right. So Nicole, I'm gonna pass this over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone. This was a great first session. I already tweeted everything out because I'm so full of these wonderful creative responses already. We're staying with visual arts first, and then we're going to the spoken word mostly. So we have some poets coming up. But first, let me introduce Yan Zhang. The title of her work is Freedom of Speech in Specimen Bottles. Yan Zhang was born in China and now lives in Windsor, Canada. She's currently an MFA candidate in painting at Wayne State University, and her current interdisciplinary painting practice is an evolving response to the daily experiences and exploring the complexity of human emotion. Before I hand it over to you, if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat. I can take notes. Otherwise, we'll have, again, a Q&A at the end of all of the 5 next presenters. All right, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. And before I start, I would like to share my screen. Can I have the permission? Okay. Here. So anybody can see, right? Okay. It's great to be here with you today. I'd like to talk you about my project, Freedom of Speech in Specimen Bottles. So I will begin by giving you some background information, and I will share some images of this project later. Finally, I will discuss why I started this project. So the lady in this photo is Dr. Ai Fen. She is a Chinese doctor and the director of the emergency department of Wuhan Central Hospital. She was the first person to report the first COVID-19 case in Wuhan on December 13, 2019. Chinese called her the whistle giver because she has played a key role in ringing the alarm about the COVID-19 outbreak. The official Chinese magazine, Pickle, interviewed her. Ai Fen's interview revealed the accurate time frame of the first reported COVID-19 patient and criticized hospital authority for suppressing early warnings of the outbreak. This article was quickly deleted from Chinese social media sites, and the People magazine quickly removed the article from its media outlets too. But internet user saved the article and posted the screenshots of it. The posts were quickly deleted by China internet patrols. After that, internet user began to use different layout to circumvent censorship, including inverted rows, reverse character order, side rows, etc. So after being deleted again, internet user began to show their great creativity by converting this article into various versions to avoid being censorship. So here I would like to show some screenshots of this article I find right now. So you can see this is the emoji version, auric version, caramel version, and the Morse code version. And there's also our barcode version, Braille version, Alvin Lucier version, Telegram version, and numbered musician notation version, side row version, Martin text version, and English version. And there's another hexadecimal encoding version, and ASIN, the Hebrew version, Chinese simplified version, and the classical version. There's more. And the Dutch version, Japanese version, and the ASIN vertical version, and the illustration version. So this various version brought this article back to life again and again, competing with the powerful and strict censorship against them. But this action only lasted less than 24 hours. Finally, the 52 version have appeared and ended up being deleted. So this was a massive act of the performers' art, expressing their protest and invading censorship. The text, the characters, graphics, symbols, and the images have faithfully recorded China's citizens' anti-censorship efforts and eagerness for their freedom of speech. I was shocked by their courage and creativity and got inspiration from them. So I decided to make an installation to record the truth of the history. So this is my project, Freedom of Speech in Specimen Bottle. It was great that I have only collected 20 version screenshots. The rest of the version have been removed from the internet and couldn't find any more. I printed out the screenshots and stored them in 20 specimen bottles. Alongside the 20 bottles, there are 32 empty specimen bottles also shown. This 32 empty bottle represent 32 disappearing versions, which suggests the deprived freedom of speech. I am from Wuhan, the epicenter of COVID-19 outbreak. I love my hometown, but the reason I start this project is that I think there must be a place for freedom of speech in history, although they were deleted. I experienced the SARS outbreak in 2003. I see similarity between the COVID-19 and the SARS outbreak. The government concealed the situation at the very beginning, and the virus began to spread an outbreak, and then a lockdown was implemented. The censorship regime is the actual cause of the unstoppable epidemic. The 52 specimen bottle are used to commemorate the process of strangulation of freedom of speech. So this is from me. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you for this very effective, visual representation of this issue. Thank you. Okay, we are with poetry. We're staying with poetry and with Pravinda Mehta, who is a literary and cultural scholar and currently teaching writing courses at Wayne State University, where she also earned her PhD in English. She's working on her book manuscript titled Mimic Women, Cultural Camouflage, Affect, and Global Modernity. Her first poetry collection is currently under review, and the title is Pandemonia Poems.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Walter Edwards and the Humanities Centers. I really appreciate for this opportunity to share some of my poems. And I am trying to save up on introduction because I have actually quite many poems, but I know within the 10 minutes of time, I will try my best to share some snippets of poems. Okay, so I'm going to begin with the very first poem, and I'm not sharing the screen because it will help me be more focused on the text. So feel free to give me your comments or any suggestions of how you feel after reading my poems. So the first poem that I have is about idea of reflection, about how we think. My overall approach in my poems is about what the pandemic has and is still teaching us. So the first poem is called When We Come Out of This. Will we be wiser or simply resume our privileges? Will we be kinder or simply defend our selfism? Will we be thoughtful or simply forget our helplessness? Will we be grateful or simply brag our survival? Will we be compassionate or simply assign fate to the unfortunate? Will we be ethical in choices or simply drench with entitlement? Will we accept our common vulnerabilities or simply blame with hate mongering? Will we learn to persist with humility to help others or simply demand callous liberation to serve our enabled egos? Will we come out of this or simply languish in philosophy or poetry? So that was a short poem. My second poem is actually something I'm really excited to share with you. This is kind of a crowdsourced poem. So what it means is it's still written by me, but I have kind of included thoughts and reflections of my students. So as you all know, in the online classes, we use Zoom. So this poem is titled Pandemic Lessons, and it kind of talks about this teacher-student interaction and thinking about the pandemic. So here it goes. The title is Pandemic Lessons. So I asked my students in the Zoom class, what have you learned in this pandemic? Any deep insights, any flickering revelations, any rueful regrets, any wanton wishes? A silence ensued for 2 seconds, an ellipsis of calm turmoil. I waited with bated breath, like bubbles disappearing in a fizzling drink, wondering what these young minds would tell me from beyond their virtual boxes with backgrounds of untraveled places. And then I saw a stream of messages filling the chat box with ebullience of red ants rushing out, seeking new directions, new outlets beyond the rims of passivity. The messages poured themselves, quenching the unknown thirst, being sequestered in a sprawling desert. Slowly, they began to share what they learned forcefully from this pandemic. Who their real friends are, checking their well-being in a text, in a call, in language of care. How they are never alone or have learned to be alone in new realities. How to pay attention to minds and bodies in gratitude and face mask. How compassion is sacred and crucial for their community, like the air they breathe and hope to survive and focus on things that matter, not the norms that bind them. How it takes a village to save lives, how less introvert they are now than they thought, how long late night drives help them clear their heads of brain fog and burnout. To cherish small interactions, the hellos and the highs that validate them to smile and believe that yes, they are still alive. To cherish the time spent with families, helping them pass this one day at a time. How they should have learned to manage their money without the trappings between paychecks, should have invested more in stocks, checked in on their friends before they passed away, to pray and find solace for themselves and loves they lost, to appreciate life and holding its flimsy threads, to paint the beauty of this world before it evaporates, to watch basketball games in nostalgia for crowded places, to seek support and save themselves from inner demons, to surround themselves with good people who make them laugh, getting through, feeling alive in this pandemic. The brimful emotional cup of my chat box showed me invisible tears and silent whispers for unknown fears, hoary sighs for a lifestyle lost in the labyrinths, beautiful smiles of resilience too. So many responses these young minds shared about their foggy futures and silver linings. Soon it is time to log off, yet they patiently wait until I thank them in gratitude about living the business of life with death looming close by. They sign off in solidarity, and one by one, these boxes disappear, until I look at my lonely face staring at me from the Zoom cage, imploring me to end this meeting with no one there. I think in humility how to write a poem capturing these emotional nuances and vagaries and quietly log off, a teacher in appreciation of so many pandemic lessons learned from my students. Thank you. So that was the pandemic lesson. Feel free to stop me when you think I should stop. The next poem is again, about the contagion. So the title is When Contagion Comes. When contagion comes, it brings swarms of mistrust and alarms of fear, wells of ignorance and quells of emotions, winds of despair and rims of misery, pleas of caution and sprees of vigils, orders of distance and borders of travel, hoarding of wares and eroding of affairs, doubting of dreams and waiting for vaccines, bouts of paranoia and clouds of dismissal. And yet, when contagion comes, it also brings aromas of kindness and fragrance of service, sweetness of philanthropy and salty reliefs, comforts of patience and caresses of care, whispers of gentleness and sighs of love, glimmers of hope and shimmers of fellowship. We wait and we wait for the ebbs on the flows. We wait and we wait for the contagion to leave us kinder, if not wiser. Yes, we wait and write and hope to live on while we wait. And do we have, I think I have some more time. So the next poem is called Another Contagion. And what I did in this poem was I looked at basically the idea of what this pandemic, what COVID-19 is about, and the symptoms. So what I have tried to do is translate the symptoms and the experience of COVID-19 into the experience of racism. So this poem is about racism, but it also talks about the contagion. And the title of this poem is Another Contagion. So your masks have come up and shown your devious minds, your privileged world of paranoia and contagious infections. Negating human connections, you live in bubbles of selfness. Shirking away in fear, you dread their vicinities in ignorance. Drowned in feverish, ghastly thoughts, you imagine in hate how their impure breathing will pollute you, endanger you. You don't want them in your communities and congregations, loving yourself too much. You can't smell the stink of putrid racism simmering in cauldrons of your rancid logic. It is exhausting with excruciating aches and pains that you can't feel because your lethargic mind simply languish in the beliefs of your rightness. You sanitize yourself from pollutants, unaware of your disgusting phobia that violates others. Perhaps there will someday come a cure of this infection that has congealed your privilege. Perhaps there will someday come a cure that will allow you to breathe in kindness to all. Till then they hope, and till then they write, hoping you will look in the mirror and remember those eyes you failed to look, those faces covered in masks of generosity you so easily overlooked. Perhaps someday. So the poem ends with an ellipsis with a sense of continuation of some kind of hope. Do I have time for one more poem? If not, that is fine.
You do.
Okay, thank you. So this poem is actually a kind of adaptation, and I also teach Shakespeare's Hamlet from time to time to students to understand human nature. So this poem is adapted from Hamlet's one of the famous soliloquies, To Be or Not to Be. Now, some of you might have heard about this or read about it, but what I have done is I have kind of twisted that soliloquy to mean something else. So the structure and the flow of the words is similar. There are quite some familiar phrases, but the thought is about the pandemic and the idea. So in Shakespeare's Hamlet, the rumination, the discussion is about death, to be or not to be. Here I'm talking about the imperative nature of why we should wear the masks. So this would be my last poem. To be or not to be, Hamlet's COVID soliloquy. To be or not to be masked, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer others your slings and arrows of outrageous droplets, or to take arms against a logic of kindness, and by opposing and it, to die alone no more, and by a careless horror we begin the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that infected flesh is heir to. It's a consummation never to be wished, to die away from loved ones, to suffer, perchance to breathe. Aye, there's the rub. For in that breath of death, what dreams may come to end when others have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause to reflect. There's the respect that makes calamity of so many suffering unknowingly. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the asymptomatic oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of arrogant self-love, the right to breathe unmasked, the insolence of office and the spurns that privilege merit the unmasked takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare poisonous exhale? Who would the burden bear to grunt and sweat amidst this virulent air, but that the dread of untimely, lonely death, the undiscovered life from whose lap we all wish to swing, puzzles the will and makes us rather courteous to prevent those ailments we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make kindred of us all, and the native hue of resolution is sicklied over the somber cast of thought, and fear of great calamity and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and accept the kindness to nobly wear the mask after all. So cover up now, let the deadly corona be banished, and in thy prayers be all its sins remembered. Thank you. So that's it for some of the different variations and experiences from students to Shakespeare's Hamlet. So I really hope that you liked it, and feel free to give me any feedback.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mehta. Especially the second one, I felt so much as an instructor. I could totally hear my students in that as well. So thank you. Okay, we're staying with literature. And our next presenter is Isaac Pickle. And we're making you co-host so that you will be able to share your screen. Who is a passing poet and PhD student of literature, focused on the borderlands of Blackness and Black literature. A graduate of Miami University's MFA program, his poetry has been featured in Black Warrior Review, Crazy Horse Fence, the Missouri Review, and Sixth Finch. And his debut chapbook, Everything Safe Will Be Last, is forthcoming from Black Lawrence Press. Isaac founded the Woodward Review to increase opportunities for campus community connection and help reestablish the literary profile of Wayne State.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Humanities Center, for having me. And I also want to thank the WSU libraries, especially Joshua Neds Fox, who has been an integral help in putting this together, and the WSU English and Art departments who have had some hand in this too. So it's really been a team effort. When the call for COVID grants first came out from Walter, some forgive me for calling you Walter. We talk about you a lot in our department. Some months ago, I was really excited because it felt like an opportunity to finally do something that I had thought about doing for a long time, which is both to respond in some way to the lingering and still lingering COVID crisis, but also as an opportunity to bring in more voices, and not just mine, from around the city, the campus community, and the country, to talk about what COVID meant and what COVID has done to all of us. That tied in pretty well with something that I had already had bouncing around in my head. And so we launched what started as a special folio literary magazine called Uncommissioned Elegies, which was meant to bring in submissions and publish through Wayne State some poetry, fiction, nonfiction that directly addressed the COVID crisis. Once I started to reach out to people, though, to team up, I got so many good responses that I decided it was worthwhile to try for something bigger. So we now have a team of nine graduate students in 4 different disciplines, and a group of undergrads who are helping us with reading and some other work. And we are now launching next week the Woodward Review, which is a national literary journal that will focus on both literature and criticism. We'll have and art. And we will open for a national audience with our first issue probably at the beginning of May. The support of the Humanities Center was really important for us here because we were able to bring together people to work, but also we're buying a website domain, we are buying a submission software, all sorts of other things that wouldn't be possible without this help. So without, I guess, any further ado, I'm gonna open up the website as it is right now. And hopefully, if you give me just a moment, hopefully be able to talk about it a little bit. So does everyone see the screen? Great. So this is what we have so far. You can see our mission is to highlight the collision between creative work and critical engagement as 2 codependent modes of responding to and moving through the world. Conceived as a magazine of arts and letters to and through Detroit, we seek to publish poetry, prose, art, and criticism that reflect the evolving calls and response we believe define the artistic histories and sensibilities of the city. So this is a Detroit-centered magazine, but we are taking and actually solely looking for submissions from people all around the country. You'll see that we also have our special folio here, which I'll show you guys in a second, and that is the Uncommissioned Elegies as originally promised. This is our team, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us, and some undergrads who are along for the ride. This website was put together by Taylor, our art director, who is a MFA student in graphic design. So this is kind of the splash page that people will find, but we've also now gotten social media accounts. So we have a Facebook with our logo that we're going to reach out to people with. We have a Twitter. And we have an Instagram. Are you guys seeing these different tabs as I open them? Great. So the goal here is to really connect with a national audience and start getting submissions by next week. But that is only our public-facing website. Once you click through on either our mission or our submissions page, we go to the back end, which is actually run by B-Press and the WSU libraries. So here you can see our full submissions call from each of our editors, what they value in prose, poetry, art, reviews and responses, which is the call and response. We're trying to get people to directly respond to writing in the magazine with instant criticism and reviews so that there is a conversation happening within the magazine itself rather than people reading it, reflecting. Instead, they're going to read it, respond themselves, and then we will publish those responses. And we think that will kind of keep the magazine vibrant. There's also the special folio, which I'm going to finish by describing. You can see we have a homepage with what may be our first issues cover, and we have our mission statement, which speaks a lot more about our motivations, what we're interested in, and who we are. So to close, I'm going to read you guys, excuse me, what our special folio is seeking. For the special folio, we're actually welcoming submissions from Wayne State University students and faculty, though for the rest of the magazine, it will be strictly people who are not connected with Wayne State to remain objective. But the special folio was motivated by what I saw as a lot of mourning when people talked about COVID-19 and the effect it's had. But a lot of that was placed externally to the actual speakers in the poetry or fiction or essays. So while the COVID-19 crisis physically isolated so many, the shared experience contributed to a year of collective action and empathy that built upon emotional connections capable of ignoring these constraints of space. However, we have read too much pandemic literature and criticism that relies on the background noise of others' suffering for its own resonance. Uncommissioned Elegies challenges contributors to consider the consequences of people trying to mourn together a tragedy which disproportionately affected the same communities that were already isolated and suffering before the virus arrived. What are the collective possibilities and pitfalls of mass movements centered on getting it, even if you never got it? Beyond this question, we want to know what new people, perspectives, and stories you have found over the course of the crisis, and also the ones you've forgotten. What have you found and forgotten about yourself? Excuse me again. So that's basically the aim of our first issue. I will link to this website to the Humanities Center once it's published in its paid form. And hopefully the Humanities Center can send this out to anyone who is interested in this event. And you guys can check it out more at length for yourself. The Digital Commons site is already available. So I'm going to put that in the chat for anyone who's interested. I'm going to close with because I'm a poet, with my own response to the prompt in the special folio. And that's actually something I wrote this morning after thinking about it for a while. So forgive me for this being a draft. Just imagine what this must be like for them. An offhand mention of worst offs and worse, how the bars are open, too wide to behave as personal protection equipment, so we must tip our caps to the fullest prisons, where nightsticks and cells fail to protect the guards and their children who lose the last years to be held close by myths of innocence. Now each glance from our window proves everybody has, at least, we are not the incarcerated, at least, we are not the hungry, at least, we can afford another order, groceries delivered from the internet. Let's practice our arithmetic on our blessings, measuring how many lives we have saved with every letter carefully drawn out on handwritten signs you can't miss because we made sure to cover our most conspicuous windows with thanks to all the essentials within reason. The ones who fit nicely in the center where the circles of risk, politics, and rhyme compete for space on the page are politics since the very beginning. Let's practice our algebra by offering them triangle-shaped cookies and infection vectors, shouting thank you from behind our best intentions and better windows and closed doors, until our message is clear, but we shout anyway and measure their gratitude in obligatory nods. Thank you for getting it so we do not have to. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for hearing, and hopefully you guys check out the Woodward Review.
Thank you so much. One quick question. So when do you expect the first issue to be published then? So you're calling for submissions now, and then what's the timeline?
Yeah, our submissions call will open probably the end of next week. And then we will stay open through the end of April, maybe the middle of April, depending on how submittable works out. And then we will be publishing starting on a rolling basis at the beginning of April.
Great. Thank you so much.
March. Of course. Thank you for asking.
Thanks. Okay. Great. Thank you all for the poetry. And we're staying with sound, but going away from poetry with our next presenter, Stan Kozadev, who is an artist scholar whose research lies at the intersection of rhetoric, media, and aesthetics. He was born in the former Soviet Union and now lives in the Metro Detroit area. Stan recently defended his dissertation at Wayne State and currently serves as part-time faculty at both WSU and Oakland University. And the title of his project is 19, a Sonic Memorial.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Okay, great. So I'm Stan, and I'd like to begin, of course, by thanking the Humanities Center. It has been a huge help in getting this project done. And of course, special thanks go both to Walter Edwards and Tiffin Carter for making all of this happen. And a quick thanks to you, Nicole, as well, for moderating this segment and keeping everything organized. I want to kind of go over some of the background of the project and then also talk about the, both the general features and if Zoom cooperates and we have enough time, I'd like to also play you a couple of snippets of the work as well. Before I do that, because I'm the last presenter, I think it's also important to acknowledge how amazing this project has been on a group level, in the sense that the grant as a whole has enabled such a wide range of responses to happen, which of course was its intent. But having seen everyone's project, it's definitely, I think, important to say just how great it was, what a wide range and wide range of effective responses that we've seen today. So a shout out to all of you, and thank you very much for providing a very inspirational couple of hours. It's certainly much needed, considering the year that we've had. And so as a background to the project, I want to say this is happening at a very appropriate time, because it's actually this week marks the 1-year anniversary for myself and my wife both for contracting COVID. And it's hard to believe that it's been a year, right? But on the other hand, we certainly have felt the year as well. And what I've noticed from the responses from everyone really is that this is somewhat of a unique, I think, phenomenon happening right now, in that this is something that the entire world is experiencing together. So on the one hand, it's very universal, but on the other hand, it's also deeply personal and intensely personal to all the participants who have been engaging in these responses. And it's personal in a different way to everyone, and so for me, I chose to focus specifically on the beginning of the pandemic, on what we now talk about as the first wave. And the environment that spawned the first wave was very specific, and it's very different from the way that we look at the pandemic now. Now we're talking a lot about fatigue, and this has been going on for a really long time, and the repeated lockdowns and so on. When this was first starting out, the zeitgeist, if you will, was very, very different. So when I contracted the disease, no one really knew. Like, Michigan did not report its first 2 cases until March 10th of last year. And that's when officially people said, okay, now it's in Michigan. But obviously, like with all other areas in the world, people were contracting the disease well before. It just hadn't made it to, the official documentation stage. And so in reality, Corona was here well before March and quite possibly even before February as well. So a big part of my response was to deal with this initial first wave of the virus first spreading throughout the world. And of course, one common theme was the lack of information that people had. You saw just a couple of presentations ago the lengths to which the Chinese government went in order to suppress information getting out. And other governments varied in their level of honesty. But as we know now, even the former administration in the United States was later shown to have, downplayed the severity of the pandemic, and it was demonstrated that they knew quite a bit more than they let on as to how severe the outbreak is going to be and its effects and so on. So this is kind of the background in which I developed this project. And there's quite a bit of focus on this initial time period in which the virus first started spreading and then becoming a pandemic. It started out, it was not a pandemic at first. It was, people getting sick. When we got sick, we didn't know what we had. And because it was so early on, we weren't actually able to be tested, even though we contracted the disease in late February. We had to wait and take antibody tests, and they were not available for us until sometime in April. I don't remember the exact date, but we literally had to get tested almost, I think, 8 weeks later or something like that, 6 to 8 weeks later to determine that it really was COVID and not something else. So it was a very different time, even though it was just a year ago. It's a very different time than it is right now. So my background is in media composition. My MS was in music technology. And so the way that I approach sound composition is, basically very similar to what you would see someone who's doing sound for film or sound for visual media. I use both what you would, traditional musical elements, as well as sound effects design, ambient effects design. And like a lot of more experimental compositions, there's also a space in which sound effects are just sounds, and musical elements, which we perceive to be musical, kind of blend or overlap. There's a long tradition of musique concrète, which is the use of sound effects, remaking them as musical elements. And so that has been my approach in responding to this challenge. So what I did was I created what is called a sonic memorial. And the sonic memorial is not my idea. It has been used in the past by artist scholars and other audio-oriented sound artists. So this idea of a sonic memorial has been used for things like the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was used to commemorate sites of labor disputes. It was used to commemorate the victims of 9/11. And so, similar to some of those other efforts by these earlier artists, I knew that I wanted to commemorate the victims of the pandemic in some way that would be meaningful and at the same time capture both the sheer number of deaths that have resulted from this, not just in the United States, but even just the sheer number of deaths just in Michigan alone. I believe right now we're approaching 17,000 deaths just in our state. And of course, we hit the 500,000 milestone nationwide as well. So I wanted to capture that, but also bring some attention to the fact that, every one of these deaths was a human being who was unique in some way. And so the way that I did that, as I was, planning on designing this particular sound piece, I knew that I wanted to include a large number of names of victims who died, and do it in such a way that we're not drawing attention to any one particular name, but at the same time, there is an impact on the listener just from the sheer number of names that you're hearing. So the composition, the way that I did it, is divided into like two major sections, as you could call them. The first one is very high impact and chaotic, and it chronicles the beginning of the pandemic, the mass confusion, the conflicting directions from, both government and medical officials. If you remember, right, not only were we facing disinformation, but we were facing people who are trying to figure out what to do on the fly. And so, you know, they said, wear masks. Then they said, don't wear masks. We might not have enough masks for everyone. Then they said, okay, we do have enough masks. Let's have everyone wear masks. And this all happened in a very short span of time. And so there was a lot of just fear that was not just caused by this ensuing pandemic, but also fear caused by the confusion, by not knowing, and also by seeing that the people in charge weren't really sure what to do. So the first half of the project documents that. The way that I did that is essentially by using the types of techniques that you would see like a documentary filmmaker use. I used segments of news recordings. I featured very heavily Mike Pence's 2020 CPAC speech, in which he said that there is really nothing to worry about, that we just have 15 cases in the US right now, and don't worry, the administration is on top of it. The 2020 CPAC speech actually took place a year from tomorrow. It was February 27th of 2020. So we're coming up on a lot of these big one-year anniversaries this week, and I think it's especially fitting that we're holding this virtual conference right now to you know, to recognize everything that's happened in the past year. And you know, as you've seen from other presentations, we have covered everything that's happened. So my presentation, being the last one, is actually going all the way full circle back to the very, very beginning of the pandemic. And so I use these documentary types of techniques to weave in news sources and politicians and talking heads and medical experts, you know, giving out conflicting information as to, you know, this is a pandemic, this is not a pandemic. Oh, this is just, you know, the media is blowing this out of proportion. We saw quite a bit on the conservative side of media broadcasting. There was this idea that this is just something to blown up by the media to make the current administration look bad. So that was, you know, we don't hear that anymore, but at the time that was a huge counter narrative, that this was just another flu and the liberal media was blowing this up to be something that it isn't, and there's nothing to worry about. And you know, that had a large part to play in the way that America responded at first to this pandemic. There's quite a bit of this counter sentiment of, oh, this is just a hoax, and or this is an exaggeration, and so on. So the first part of the project deals with that, and then the second part of the project, which is considerably longer, is done in a more like an ambient style composition, and it incorporates about 800 or so names from all from the Michigan area, mostly from the Metro Detroit area, but including other people in Michigan. And those names, because there are so many of them, the way that I framed it was that the names are being read continuously for about the last 8 or 9 minutes or so of the piece. And they're done in such a way that if you pay attention, you can make out the individual names and you can hear that each one of these victims is a person. But if you kind of zone out a little bit more and listen to the piece as a whole, then the names fade into the background a little bit, and then just they form part of the sound ambience as a whole. There are a couple of things I also did specifically to kind of commemorate the pandemic in a more like symbolic way, and they were interesting, and I think that they were challenging also from a creative standpoint. So three things that had to do with the number 19 specifically that I wanted to weave into the composition. One was that it's 19 minutes in length, exactly. So I made it down to the second 19 minutes. I felt that that was important because this would be the one visual marker, because it's a sound composition, so there are no visual elements to it. But on the other hand, we all consume sound compositions on visually oriented devices. And so anyone who were to pull this up on any digital player would immediately see the length of the piece as being 19 minutes and 0 seconds. And I thought it was a very obvious way to do something that was immediately, you know, easy to perceive by any audience. Another thing that I did that was within the piece itself is that for the first part of the composition, I used the time signature of 19. So what that means for the non-music majors, right, is if you think of like a march being a 1-2-1-2 and a waltz being a 1-2-3 1-2-3 1-2-3. So this used 19 as the time signature, is 19/4 time. It's a little bit challenging to use because it's a very long time signature. It's complex. The way that I subdivided it for this piece was actually as 5-6-5-3, and then that repeats over and over again. I thought that it was an interesting way of doing something that is not so obvious, but on the other hand, directly relates to some of the symbolism of the virus itself, in the sense that we're very used to the number 19 now meaning something very specific. And then the last thing that I did was for the musical aspects of the composition, for the more traditional harmonically oriented musical aspects of the composition, I used the tuning system that divides the octave into 19 notes rather than 12. So your traditional Western scale is 12 notes per octave. And this is an entirely different tuning system. It's called 19 tone equal temperament, or 19 EDO, which is 19 equally divided octave. But the basic meaning is just that the octave is split into 19 notes rather than 12. And what it means is that, every step in the octave is about 2/3 of what a standard note would be. For people who are accustomed to listening to traditional Western music, it sometimes means that things sound a bit more dissonant, in comparison. But it was especially appropriate to this piece because it is dramatic, and the music is obviously not meant to be happy in any way. So I wanted to try just quickly to play you a couple of snippets, and Zoom tends to be a bit buggy when it comes to media sharing and other things. So I was actually wanted to try to do some direct audio and see if we can do it that way. And I'm going to look at the screen as I do this, and I'll ask you if you can hear this. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to show you was something that I knew I wanted to work into the piece from the beginning. And that was the sound of ventilators, right? So ventilators is something that, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, featured very, very heavily as a theme in media and conversations because we were short on ventilators. And people were at risk of dying if we did not have enough. At the time, doctors were rigging multiple patients to one ventilator. There were reports of people using like literally scuba diving gear to try to overcome these problems. But from a sonic standpoint, I knew early on that I wanted to work into this composition. So I'm going to isolate it, and we're going to see if you guys can hear just what a ventilator sounds like. Is that coming through the feed okay for you? Okay, great. So the thing about ventilators is that I didn't have to artificially loop the sound. A ventilator, right, as you can imagine, is an artificial breathing machine, so it has its own rhythm. And as a kind of like an idée fixe type of device, it's really, really effective. Of course, my concern was that people would think about Star Wars and Darth Vader. But the character of an actual ventilator is, as you can hear probably even over Zoom, is a little bit different than that. So what I did was for the second half of the piece, where it's like longer, it's more ambient, and it focuses on reading people's names, I used the ventilator as the sole rhythmic component of that whole second half of the piece, and essentially what you just heard, right? Because it is itself rhythmic, it doesn't need to be looped. It provides, I think, a very important, sonic component that you would need. Are we doing okay on time? Okay. I'm going to play you another snippet. This time I'm going to show you the whole thing. So one other thing that I did was I used this idea of the code 7. Code 7 is dead on arrival. And I use the piece both to explain what it is so that you're not guessing, so it's not like completely abstract. But at the same time, I then blended this idea of the code 7 into together with the name readings. And I'll play you just maybe like 30 seconds of what that sounds like.
Code 7 is a radio call sign used in Detroit when a person is found dead on arrival.
65-year-old male not breathing. There's been this uptick that's very noticeable in the code 7s that we're getting.
Davina Atkins, Alfred Adams Zellnow, Darren Adams, David Chinadam, Mark Francis English, Brad Sanders, Alfred John.
Okay, so I don't know what level of detail is coming through the live stream, right? But the basic idea was that you have the ventilator as like the rhythmic bed, and then you have the names being read. And for the name reading, I ended up, I was debating whether or not to go with like live people reading it, or doing some kind of a group reading or separate readings or whatever. I ended up actually going with a screen reader. Because I felt that was really the right pathos for the piece. It again, I think, put forth this idea that you can hear each individual name if you put in the effort, but if you don't put in the effort, you just hear this really disembodied, like Siri type voice, just rattling off name after name after name after name after name. And keep in mind that I only used maybe about 800 names out of the 16 or 17,000 people that have perished to date just in Michigan alone. So that's my presentation. The piece is done, and I actually finished it on the 1-year anniversary of myself contracting Corona, and it's been an amazing experience doing this. I want to close by thanking everyone again for being inspirational, and of course thanking the Humanities Center for making this possible. I'm assuming that we'll get to upload our stuff somewhere where people can hear like a more high-res version of the piece and go through it on their own and kind of experience it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I also want to second the thank you to Tiffin and Walter, of course, for putting this together, and also Tiffin for the schedule, because everyone spoke so nicely to each other, I think, and ending with this as a memorial is just very fitting, I think. And it gave us time to also let the poems simmer a little bit. And so I want to open the floor for questions. I haven't picked up any in the chat yet. So please, anyone who wants to ask a question in the chat, or also by unmuting yourself and asking in person. Walter, yes, why don't we start with you?
Yes, I wanted to go back to the first presentation in the session, freedom of speech in specimen bottles. And I wanted to ask the speaker, what has been the response of the Chinese government or Chinese officials to that? Because on the surface, it looks like a rather courageous thing for her to do. And I think we have to be grateful to people who are willing to do stuff like that so that we can know the truth. But I just wondered if she wants to share any kind of negative or positive feedback she has had from her work.
Thank you for your question. The cost of speaking out in China is still high. So even right now, the government has no any response to this issue, and like the delay or something. They just say they do this just for the sake of the social stability. So the person, like the doctor and the relevant the staff, they has been punished, especially for Ivan right now. She is disappearing for some time, but at least right now we got some news from her. So I think this process should be take a long time, so we can get the proper freedom of the speech. It take a long time to wait. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have you gotten any pushback, you yourself, or I don't know how public your art has been, but
I think that's I don't see any pressure right now from from my homeland. But anyway, China kind of like published the regulations that if spreading rumor is criminal. So it's very difficult to judge which is what is the rumor, what is the truth. It depends on. So it's the double standard we needed to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for anyone? If you want to draw connections to the ones before, I'm sure that's welcome too.
Yes.
I just thought the poetry was all outstanding. It was just, all of it was just really remarkable. I just wanted to comment on that. It was just, all the poets were just so beautiful. I was very impressed.
Thank you. Yes. Comments like that also very welcome. I think artists put so much work in these kind of expressions, right? That it's just so good to hear that and to be able to actually share it with all of us. That is so wonderful. Yeah. Dr. Kobata, you have your hand up.
Okay. I don't know if I repeat myself because I have to leave the room for a moment, but when the pandemic started, as I said before, I was putting some readings connected to that for a reading group. And there was Philip Roth, Nemesis, of course, Albert Camus, La Plague, Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera, Saramago, especially the film on blindness, the first. And I found out, and this has to do with the first presenter of this section, the Wuhan Diaries that I read by Fan Fang. And I was impressed. I don't know if you covered this before, because as I said, I left the room for a moment. Well, I was impressed for what has been said more than once, the denial of the government in the different countries at the beginning about the seriousness of the virus. And Fan Fang wrote in the media, and her pieces were censored, but she kept writing and receiving feedback from the people. So I was very impressed by that first-hand information from the Wuhan Diaries. And I like your installation very much. The symbolic effect and so much critical. So I pass now to the poets. Sylvia, I share with you the start writing in English that I have been doing more and more lately, because as a literary critic of Latin American literature, I have 6 books and more than 100 articles, mostly in Spanish. But now, moving in a different setting and with the desire to reach a wider audience, I am writing in English, and it's a different feeling. And it's not only the language, but what I experience from your poems is like being a foreigner. And I was surprised so many foreigners in this panel, in these panels, how you capture the different aspects of the pandemic in the US and the different reactions from the Flint water to the other things. In the case of the next poet, I forgot the name now. I had made some notes. Well, yeah, as somebody mentioned before, I think the most moving one is when you capture all the voices from the students in the screen. That is a kind of Greek choir, no? Being there, giving voice to a shared pain, because that it was all about. And I celebrate the journal, the Detroit journal, and the very cryptic poem. I would like to read the poems if it's possible, because sometimes I get lost by the process of listening to them. But I think it's a great enterprise, especially when you mention this interaction with the audience. Before I came to the United States, I was in Colombia, and I used to write to the newspaper there, and the same in Argentina, my native country. And it's so gratifying to have your own students, your friends, people you don't know, reading your piece and commenting. In the academic journals, it takes longer, and there is so many feelings in the mix when they react to your pieces, good and bad. But I think it's very important to have this immediate feedback of what you do, establish a very fruitful dialogue and very creative, that interaction, especially now. And the last speaker, I was impressed by the sound of the respirator. And I suppose you, being first-hand sufferer of the pandemic at the beginning, as you said, when nobody knew anything, and there was an oscillation between denial and acknowledgement, and a lot of political motives, well, all the way, how you were able to transmute it, to change that personal suffering in a work of art. So thank you.
Thank you for that summary and reflection that really brought them all together one more time. Does anyone want to comment back on what we just heard?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Corbetta. I really like the connection that you make of a Greek choir. And this was something as an experiment that I wanted to ask. You know, for just to write poems about pandemic, you can imagine, you know, I tried to go through different sources, you know, but like a choir, like how do we play with emotion, right, without overplaying with it? So I wanted to show this kind of a lesson that a teacher is learning from the students, and the students were literally like opening up with their responses. So I think that was my really most favorite poem that I shared. But really, thanks for your feedback. Thanks for your comments.
Well, I agree with you that we learn from the students. With my graduate students, especially in almost 30 years at Wayne, I learn a lot, because more in an academic way than and you learn more from a human point of view now, that I think is very important.
Yes.
Okay, Isaac, you have a question for Sylvia.
Hi, Sylvia. Thank you for those poems. They're wonderful. As someone who has read a lot of poets translated into English and not had the ability to read the poems in the pre-translated form for lack of language skills, I am always curious about the way that translators themselves play or transform metaphor, images that maybe do not have direct translation and might just be sort of emotional valences, and also try to hold on to the sound play that tends to be inherent to poetry. So I guess my question for you was, you said this is the first time seriously writing poetry in English. Did you find yourself constructing kind of images and wordplay in English that was different than the sort of tone or style that you would usually use in German?
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. That's a great question, and of course it gets right to the heart of my writing, because what I can tell you is I have refused for literally more than a decade to write poetry in English, because I was absolutely convinced that I am not able to achieve the creativity that I have in my native language, and I still don't have that. What I did though with this, I finally let myself be pushed by several people to give it a try, and I think what was important is that I completely stayed in English all the time. So when I started taking notes, when I walked around thinking about what I would like to do, when I did some research on the 10 biblical plagues, because I wanted to base it loosely on that, everything was in English only, right? So that I wouldn't even be tempted into coming up with wonderful ideas in German and then not being able to translate that. Because I can tell you, I have translated one academic book from English to German, and translating is such a creative endeavor itself, and it's so much more difficult than I thought it would be, right? And so even when I have my German poems, and now I'm sometimes asked, okay, couldn't you translate that? It's really sometimes something that I feel I cannot. I mean, I can do it, but I cannot achieve it in some cases that I would say this is just as I like this just as much in English as I like it in German, right? So that is my answer to your question. This is a very it's a challenge for me all around, and it has much to do also with the fact that when I was about to move to the United States for completely private reasons, that was my biggest heartache, because I loved my language. I knew that I was a writer at heart, and I knew I would somehow have to give up a big part of that. So right now I'm getting to a point after many years here that I feel more comfortable in English to give poetic writing a try too. So. And by the way, before I let you go, I wanted to compliment you on launching that journal. I think that's amazing. I wish you best of luck with it, and I also very much appreciated your poem. I think that was fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that German English thing. Of course, being a German native speaker as well, I'm thinking, oh my, English is much more restrictive, right? In terms of sentence structure. In German, you can play around so much with where to put what and how to create those sentences. So that seems really difficult. So yeah, I'm there too. I would never attempt poetry, I think, in English. So that's really cool. Thank you. Other questions?
Isaac, did I hear you say that you wrote that final poem just this morning?
Yeah, I was considering if I was going to make
if that's true, You are a genius.
Just lucky, just lucky. Thank you. I hope it was okay. I didn't have a PowerPoint. It was one or the other, and I went with the poem.
That's a good poem. Who is your advisor in the English department?
Lisa Z. Winters.
Okay.
Yep. And working a little bit with Jonathan Flatley as well, and Sarika Chandra.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Good. I miss being a creative writer all the time, but it is good that I'm studying literature these days.
Okay.
I want to say
yes.
to Nicole, try writing poetry, because I had the same attitude some years back. And honestly, I didn't think, I've been teaching poetry for so many years and reading that, but I just, try it once. The worst case would be that it would be a bad poem, but you never know. You might be surprised by your own thoughts. So please do try it as an activity. You might really get drawn into it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, today was very inspirational, so maybe, yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like there are no more questions at this point. Oh, Isaac, yes, please.
Yeah, I just with all the bilingual and multilingual discussion of poetry in here and artwork in general, I just I want to say that I feel like sincerely inspired to try writing in the broken tongues that I have, and really sort of commend everyone for those efforts, and hope that everyone keeps trying, that Nicole and you start, and Parvinder and Sylvia, you continue, and there's just something really incredible about being able to express sort of the hidden thoughts that poetry has in the logics of different language. So
I'm actually trying to finish a poem which is hybrid. It's I speak Punjabi, that's my native language. So the word the word rona means to cry, and rona is a short form of corona. So I'm trying to play with it, but I couldn't finish it, so I didn't share it. But yeah, hybridization of language would be a great way to talk.
Yes, John.
Yeah, I had a comment, and I noticed throughout all the presentations, there is the natural theme of communication, that poetry, all this, and the need of humans to communicate to another person, whether you're doing it through one technology or the other, one language or another. This theme of the need of the human heart to reach out to others. And the pandemic restricted that. And that's what I think why the art comes to be so powerfully done, because that need comes out. And I just noticed that in all the presentations.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's what made them all hold together too, right? They are all expressions of, yeah, kind of what's lacking, or replacing the communication. Yes, thank you.
I would like to add, it's not only a deep need, but it's therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's therapeutic. Recently, I am moving in another setting that is the psychoanalytic people in Michigan, and I constantly advocate for the therapeutic power of the arts. When I was putting that seminar or reading list for a group, that is what I have in mind. Coming with other pandemics, and that goes through some kind of history. Well, 20th century, 21st century, the texts I chose, but is restoring and putting humanity together and enforcing the need of communication and in order to survive. It's more than art. It's a human need to survive with the other, even though, as Parvinder said very well in one line or two of her poems, this conflict between paranoia and need of the other. Sometimes I found myself, I live in an arbor, walking outside with a mask or without a mask because it was outdoor in the arboretum. And when I was seeing somebody coming closer, it was a very instinctive physical reaction of rejection. I don't want you to come close, you know, because that ambivalence between we need the other, but the other could be, as Stan said, no, I think a focus of infection, contagion, no? So yeah, it's a very complex moment we are going through that inspire us a lot of feelings and a lot of reflection, I think. A lot of reflection. What means to be human, etc. No, that is the basic. And so all these manifestations that I appreciate so much are expressions of a common set of feelings that has been stirred inside of all of us. No.
Yeah, and thinking in terms of therapy, that's what came to mind first with Elise's piece too, right? The destruction of something and then the mending of it. I think that's kind of what we're going.
The act of repairing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Stan's piece that is in a way mourning the dead and also visualizing, or well, not visualizing, but sonically, I don't even know the word for that, but you all know, you heard it. So
yeah. No, this has been a very, very good event. Yeah,
thank you.
Maybe we should have more of these kind of events. It may not be a bad idea. Or people who are interested, you know, maybe once a month or it would be. I really tremendously enjoyed it. So Dr. Edwards, really thank you for this opportunity. And thank you all of you who also shared amazing work, you know, to think about sound, to think about other forms of art. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, who knew how many creative people we have right here, right? That's something we don't see as much, and that's something to be celebrated for sure.
And from different nationalities.
Walter, do you want the last word?
Yes, I just want to say thanks for the to the speakers who shared their work. Even though there were some technical difficulties, we really enjoyed it, and it really was what the Humanities Center's advisory board envisaged, that we could have creative responses. That's the word creative was in the rubric, responses, and we envisaged that we would get responses from across the arts and the humanities and exactly what we want. And we were able to see those sort of artistic performance with good poetry, good music, and everything. I thought it was good, and we actually started on time, and we are going to end on time exactly as we had predicted. And I want to really, really, really give a shout out to Tiffin Carter for putting this together, for preparing the flyers, for communicating with the speakers, for getting the the financial matters sorted out and paying the bills and being a host throughout this event on a Friday. And and thanks to the moderators, these are voluntary efforts. Nicole and Heather volunteered their time to be here and to take command of the proceedings. So all in all, I am delighted with the outcome of this project. And when the advisory board meets sometime later this month, I will be sure to report to them that this was a successful event. We were able to maintain a good audience throughout. I mean, we started with somewhere in the 30s, early 30s, and throughout the day. Even at this time on a Friday afternoon, we still have 18 people listening to us. So thanks all. And
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for communicating with me. I think this was very hard for me because I'm working behind the scenes. So I was so in tune with everyone's project and presentation. A couple times I got a little choked up because this pandemic and COVID has definitely affected all of us. But everyone, just a wonderful job. I know it was hard for the advisory board to pick the presentations, but they did a wonderful job. And thank you all. Thank you to Heather and Nicole. And thank you, Dr. Edwards, for giving me a little shout out.
Thank you. All right. If the moderator is satisfied, then she can end the meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Maybe we'll give a nice round of applause for everyone, virtually real. It was really great. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.